When Bonanza aired in 1959, it introduced us to the Cartwright family in all their rugged, magnetic glory. Week after week, audiences tuned in to watch the Cartwrights in their element, navigating loyalty, loss, justice, and the wild edges of frontier life. For 14 whole seasons, the show held its ground and became one of the most beloved series ever to hit American television. But what most people never realized is that not everything filmed for Bonanza actually made it to the big screen. Some scenes were quietly clipped out because they were considered too offensive for the times, scenes that pushed boundaries the network wasn't ready to face. Others disappeared for reasons that were far messier: behind-the-scenes conflicts, studio politics, and moments the producers didn't want resurfacing. So what were these forbidden Bonanza scenes that vanished before anyone could see them? And why were the producers so determined to keep them buried and out of every conversation? Join us as we get into all the details. How Bonanza became the Western that wouldn't die. Bonanza didn't just take a seat on American television, it built its own empire. From its debut on NBC on September 12, 1959, to its final bow on January 16, 1973, the show ran for a massive 14 seasons and 431 episodes. That run made it NBC's longest-standing Western, the second longest on any American network, right behind Gunsmoke, and one of the longest-running live-action series ever produced. And here's the wild part: it's still airing in syndication today, proving that the show never really left. The story dropped viewers straight into the 1860s, but it wasn't the dust, horses, or gunfights that kept people hooked. It was the Cartwright family. They lived just outside Virginia City, Nevada, right along the deep blue stretch of Lake Tahoe. The original cast alone looked like a lineup destined for TV history: Lorne Greene, Pernell Roberts, Dan Blocker, and Michael Landon. Later seasons brought in Guy Williams, David Canary, Mitch Vogel, and Tim Matheson, each adding their own shape to the show's rhythm. And unlike most Westerns of its time, Bonanza didn't run from tough topics. It leaned into moral dilemmas and didn't mind leaving viewers thinking long after an episode ended. Every week, the show followed the Cartwrights, a family built on survival, loyalty, and three completely different personalities. At the center was Ben Cartwright, a thrice-widowed father who somehow held the Ponderosa and his sons together at the same time. Adam, calm and calculated, carried the architect's mind. Hoss, warm and gentle, was the kind of man who filled a room before he even said a word. And little Joe? He was the firecracker, impulsive, emotional, and impossible not to watch. Through flashbacks and clever storytelling, the show revealed that each of Ben's wives had a different ancestry: English, Swedish, and French Creole. Even Hop Sing, the family's Chinese cook, felt like a pillar in the household, giving the Ponderosa a heartbeat beyond ranch work and family drama. Speaking of the Ponderosa, this wasn't some tiny patch of land. The Cartwright Ranch stretched across 1,000 square miles on the eastern edge of Lake Tahoe. Later, in Lorne Greene's 1964 song Saga of the Ponderosa, the land size was casually updated to 500,000 acres, just to drive home how massive the place really was. The ranch got its name from the Ponderosa pine, a tree that practically defines the western landscape. And whenever the Cartwrights rode into Virginia City, you could expect them to cross paths with Sheriff Roy Coffey or Deputy Clem Foster, familiar faces that grounded the series even more. What made Bonanza stand out was how un-Western it felt at times. Sure, there were shootouts and saloons, but the main focus was always the family, how they loved, fought, protected, and learned from each other, and how they stepped into causes bigger than themselves. In the early days, though, the show wasn't guaranteed success. It aired on Saturdays at 7:30 p.m., fighting for attention against Dick Clark on ABC and Perry Mason on CBS. Ratings were good enough to stay alive, but nowhere near breakout. Behind the scenes, executives whispered about the budget. It was too expensive, too ambitious. The only reason Bonanza survived? color. NBC knew they were sitting on one of the first TV shows filmed and broadcast fully in color, complete with sweeping shots of Lake Tahoe that made black and white shows look ancient. RCA, NBC's parent company, leaned on it hard to sell their brand new color television sets, and that push saved the show. Then came the power move. For Season 3, NBC shifted Bonanza to Sunday nights at 9 p.m. and brought in Chevrolet as a sponsor. That slot change didn't just help. It launched the show into the stratosphere. By 1964, Bonanza became the #1 show in America, and it clung to that position until 1967. By 1970, it set a record by remaining in the top 5 for 9 straight seasons, something no one had pulled off before. Even when the ratings finally dipped in 1971, NBC refused to let the show fade. During the summer of 1972, older episodes from 1967 to 1970 were rebranded as Ponderosa and aired on Tuesdays, while fresher reruns kept the Bonanza name on Sundays. That fall, early seasons were released to local stations under the Ponderosa title. Only after the 1973 cancellation did everything settle back into the familiar Bonanza name viewers already loved. But while Bonanza's episodes continued to air and entertain, the cameras never told the full story. Behind the scenes, cast members had their own quirks, tricks, and secrets that shaped the show in ways viewers rarely saw. Michael Landon's secret trick on Bonanza. The cameras never told you. Even though he played Little Joe on Bonanza, Michael Landon didn't like being the shortest person on set. To fix this problem, he wore platform shoes that made him 4 inches taller. And it wasn't the only time he did something like this. On Little House on the Prairie, Landon used platform boots again to stay the tallest among the Ingalls clan. Small tricks like this shaped how Landon appeared on screen, confident, commanding, and impossible to miss, and remind us that even the most polished shows had little secrets hidden just out of sight. Actors did their own stunts in the early seasons. Despite eventually becoming a TV classic, no one expected Bonanza to take off when it first aired. Budgets were tight, and to save money, many of the actors performed their own stunts instead of hiring doubles. For the most part, it went smoothly, but there were occasional mishaps. One unforgettable moment involved Lorne Greene. During a stunt where he leapt from a cliff into a body of water, his toupee didn't stay put. Instead, it floated to the surface before he did, creating a moment of unplanned comedy that would never make it on screen. Yet the cast never let it go. Even these small moments behind the scenes show how much risk, effort, and personality went into making Bonanza more than just a Western. It wasn't just the Cartwright stories that captivated audiences. It was the dedication, the humor, and the unseen sacrifices that kept the show alive, week after week. But not all behind-the-scenes stories were humorous. Some involved deep creative conflicts and personal decisions that would change the show forever. Pernell Roberts left the show after issues with filming. There's nothing unusual about unhappy lead actors leaving a hit show, and Bonanza had its share. The biggest shakeup came when Pernell Roberts, who played Adam Cartwright, decided to walk away. His reasons went beyond typical on-set disagreements. Creative differences, moral concerns, and frustrations with the show's portrayal of certain groups all played a part. Roberts objected, for instance, to the way black and white actors were cast as Native Americans. Lorne Greene tried to convince him to stay, asking him to ride it out a little longer, but Roberts had made up his mind. After roughly 200 episodes, Adam Cartwright was written out of the series, sent to Europe, and never seen again. His departure left a hole in the Cartwright family dynamic, but it also highlighted a truth about Bonanza. Even under the dazzling colored skies and sweeping Lake Tahoe shots, tensions simmered beneath the surface. Behind every heroic story and every moral lesson was a cast of real people with real opinions, sometimes clashing, sometimes quitting, and always shaping the legacy of one of television's most enduring westerns. Michael Landon and Pernell Roberts hated each other. While Pernell Roberts had his own issues with how Bonanza was produced, that wasn't the only thing that drove him away. His co-star, Michael Landon, made no effort to hide his disdain for Roberts, and Roberts felt the same way. Landon had a habit of gossiping about his fellow cast members on talk shows. And when Roberts was the topic, it was never flattering. Meanwhile, Roberts didn't hold back either, criticizing Landon's acting abilities to anyone in the media who would listen. The tension between them was palpable, simmering quietly on set, yet rarely spilling into the show itself. It's hard to imagine the bright, family-friendly world of the Cartwrights hiding so much friction behind the scenes. But that clash between Landon and Roberts reminds us that even the most iconic TV families weren't immune to real human conflict. What viewers saw as loyalty and brotherhood was often underpinned by egos, rivalries, and silent battles fought far from the camera's gaze. Despite the tensions on set, Landon's path to becoming Little Joe was far from straightforward. Michael Landon wasn't the first choice for Little Joe. The Cartwrights just wouldn't be the same without Michael Landon as the youngest brother, Little Joe. But believe it or not, he wasn't the first choice. The casting director had other actors in mind, Robert Blake or Robert Fuller, and Landon's audition didn't immediately impress. Luck or fate intervened. The casting director's wife caught sight of Landon's headshot and was intrigued. She saw something in him, a spark that made her push for him to get the role. Thanks to her insistence, Landon was given the chance to step into the shoes of Little Joe, and the rest is television history. While Landon's rise to Little Joe was secured, the show still faced a bigger challenge when another key, Cartwright, Adam, left, forcing producers to decide how to handle the gap in the family dynamic. Producers decided not to recast his role after Pernell Roberts left. It's always a headache when actors leave a hit show. Sometimes characters are recast, and viewers are expected to accept it. Other times, they're simply written out. This was the exact dilemma Bonanza faced after Pernell Roberts walked away. Producers briefly considered replacing him, but ultimately decided to write Adam out and introduce a new character. Enter cousin Will Cartwright, played by Guy Williams. A fresh face, a new dynamic, a potential bridge to fill the gap left by Adam. But Will's time on the show was shockingly brief. He appeared in just 5 episodes before disappearing for reasons that remain unclear to this day. Fans were left with more questions than answers, and the Cartwright family once again returned to its familiar dynamic, just a little leaner, but no less iconic. While the producers scrambled to adjust the family dynamic after Adam's departure, another source of tension simmered quietly on set. Michael Landon, whose perfectionism and strong opinions often clashed with crew members and co-stars alike. Michael Landon had lots of issues with the set crew. Michael Landon was a phenomenal actor and a gifted writer for Bonanza, but he wasn't always easy to work with. His legendary feud with Pernell Roberts is well known, but that was just the tip of the iceberg. Landon had a reputation for clashing with crew members across the board. Whether it was a lighting technician, a sound guy, or anyone involved in production, Landon seemed to have an opinion, and he wasn't shy about expressing it. Every scene, every camera angle, and every line of dialogue had to meet his exacting standards. His dedication to perfection made for brilliant television, but it could also make life behind the scenes tense. While Landon's exacting standards created tension behind the camera, the show's production faced other financial quirks that surprised even the main cast. In early seasons, guest stars got paid more than the main actors. The actors who played the Cartwrights are legends today, but at the time, most were still climbing the Hollywood ladder. To give the show a fighting chance, producers brought in big-name guest stars like Adam West, Leonard Nimoy, and Zsa Zsa Gabor. Since these actors drew the most viewers, they commanded higher salaries than the main cast. A collection of relatively unknown performers trying to make their mark. Beyond casting and salaries, the creators made countless subtle choices that most viewers never noticed. Even in the very first episode, the pilot had a cutscene where the Cartwrights sing the theme song. Fans know the Bonanza tune by heart, but not everyone realizes it actually had lyrics. And frankly, they weren't anything to write home about. Still, the idea of Ben, Hoss, Adam, and Little Joe singing it themselves would have been unforgettable. That scene was cut before the pilot ever aired, leaving it as a hidden gem for die-hard fans to track down online today. It's a small, almost invisible detail, but it shows just how many tiny decisions went into creating the magic that is Bonanza. And just like the cut theme song, even the Cartwrights' costumes had hidden reasoning behind them. Producers kept character wardrobes small to save money. Money always seemed to be a major issue for the show, so producers took every opportunity they could to keep the budget as low as possible. Even as the show got wildly popular and received more funding, the wardrobe department kept character costumes to an absolute minimum. This wasn't just to save money on fabric and supplies. It also helped with filming. Since the characters were basically always wearing the same thing, the show could easily reuse footage for basic, common scenes, like when the characters traveled from one location to another. The producers of Bonanza were absolute experts at cutting corners and pinching pennies. And just like their costumes were carefully managed, even the Cartwrights' hair wasn't quite what it seemed. All the Cartwrights wore a wig or dyed their hair. The Cartwrights always seemed to have impossibly perfect hair, especially for rootin' tootin', rough-riding ranchers. However, all those luscious locks were thanks to TV magic. All of the main characters actually wore a wig or dyed their hair at some point during the show's decade-plus run. Lorne Greene, Pernell Roberts, and Dan Blocker all wore wigs for at least part of their time on the show. While Michael Landon had a full head of hair and required no wig, he was famous on Bonanza and beyond for dyeing his hair after going gray in his 20s. Just as the Cartwrights' appearances were carefully crafted, even the show's opening credits hid small, curious details that most viewers never noticed. The opening credits map points towards magnetic north, not true north. The opening credits of Bonanza aren't just famous because of the iconic theme song. Fans of the show probably remember the map of Nevada with all the show's major locations that appears at the end of the opening and catches fire. However, some people noticed the compass on the map looked a little wonky. Even though the compass might not look like it's pointing north, it technically is. For unknown reasons, the producers decided that the compass should point towards magnetic north, not true north. Because magnetic north isn't precisely at the top of the globe, it looked like the compass was pointing in the wrong direction. Just as the producers made unexpected choices behind the scenes, Bonanza also leaned on surprising partnerships to keep the show thriving. Chevrolet was a longtime sponsor of the show. Corporate sponsors are nothing unusual in the TV world, especially back in the day when Bonanza originally aired. However, the show couldn't have picked a stranger or less appropriate sponsor if they tried. Despite the show being a Western set in the late 1800s, Chevrolet was a longtime sponsor of the show. Even though Chevrolet vehicles were not yet a thing in the 1800s, the company sponsored the show for most of its run, beginning with Season 3, and actors from the show even appeared in Chevy commercials from time to time. It's definitely one of the most bizarre cross-promotions in TV history. Just as Bonanza relied on unexpected sponsors to stay in the spotlight, the series also pulled in star power from other corners of television to keep viewers intrigued. A lot of Star Trek cast members guest starred on the show. TV shows are always looking for ways to draw in new viewers who might not necessarily be their target demographic, and Bonanza was no exception. One of the most tried-and-true methods is getting actors from one show to guest star on another. For this, the show, strangely enough, went with the classic Star Trek series. A whole slew of sci-fi icons from the classic show popped in at Ponderosa from time to time, although, unfortunately, not as their Star Trek characters. The guest list included William Shatner, Leonard Nimoy, Nichelle Nichols, and George Takei. Bonanza inspired Star Trek, Deep Space Nine. Bonanza has a surprising number of connections to the Star Trek franchise. Several actors from the original series guest starred on Bonanza, but the relationship doesn't end there. Years later, this classic Western went on to inspire another Star Trek classic, Deep Space Nine. This isn't that surprising, as several writers from Bonanza went on to write for Deep Space Nine. At this new gig, the writers focused heavily on the relationships between characters and the recurring moral dilemmas the crew faced, which is exactly the approach writers took while working on Bonanza. Bonanza's influence even reached Star Trek, but it wasn't just its stories that set it apart. The show also made a historic leap in television itself by airing fully in color, a move that helped save it from early cancellation. The switch to color TV saved the show. Bonanza originally aired just as TVs were making the move from black and white to full color. The timing couldn't have been more perfect for the show, which very well could have been canceled early without this technological innovation. While they weren't the first show aired in color, they did lay claim to another important first. Bonanza was the first show on TV to air episodes that were completely in color from start to finish. Network executives were in the process of shutting down the show, but since color TV was still such a novelty, they decided to hold off, and the rest is history. While innovations like full-color episodes helped keep Bonanza on the air, life on the Ponderosa remained as dramatic and unpredictable as ever. And for the women who crossed paths with the Cartwrights, survival was never guaranteed. Ladies didn't live long. It wasn't safe to be a woman around the Ponderosa. Ben Cartwright was widowed 3 times, hence his 3 sons by 3 different mothers. The Cartwright men had various love interests, but none stuck around, and many died or left town. In a fit of irony, Roberts' Adam character had originally been slated to leave with a new wife and daughter. When the actor decided to stay, the producer ushered out Guy Williams by having the woman fall in love with his character instead, facilitating an exit for all 3 characters. Life on the Ponderosa was full of drama and sudden losses, both on screen and off. None hit harder than the unexpected death of Dan Blocker, whose absence would forever change the show. Blocker's death hastened the end of the show. The end of Bonanza wasn't so much a creative decision as it was the result of real-life tragedy. In May 1972, just as production was ramping up for the show's 14th season, actor Dan Blocker, who had portrayed Hoss Cartwright since the show's very first episode, died unexpectedly at the age of 43 from complications following gallbladder surgery. His sudden passing devastated the cast, crew, and longtime fans of the series. Blocker's absence was immediately felt, not just behind the scenes, but in the show's storytelling itself. Rather than recast the role or write in a new character to fill Hoss's place, the producers made the bold decision to continue the show without him. That choice, though respectful, shifted the chemistry of the main cast in a noticeable way. Hoss had always been a grounding presence, gentle yet dependable, humorous yet deeply empathetic. Without him, the show felt different, and viewers agreed. Ratings took a hit almost immediately in season 14, especially after NBC then made the fateful decision to move Bonanza from its comfortable Sunday evening time slot to Tuesday nights, a time when many of its original viewers were less likely to tune in. With ratings continuing to fall and the loss of one of its most beloved characters looming large, NBC decided to cancel the show mid-season. Unlike many series that are allowed to craft a proper send-off, Bonanza did not get that luxury. By the time Bonanza aired its final episode, titled The Hunter, on January 16, 1973, it wasn't promoted as a series finale. In fact, it played out like a standard episode, albeit one with a much darker and more psychological tone than fans were used to. The spotlight fell squarely on little Joe Cartwright, played by Michael Landon, whose star had continued to rise throughout the show's run. In The Hunter, Joe becomes the target of a mentally unstable ex-soldier named Corporal Bill Tanner, played chillingly by Tom Skerritt, who is now a wilderness-dwelling survivalist. Tanner views Joe not as a man, but as prey, something to stalk, toy with, and ultimately destroy. What follows is an intense cat-and-mouse chase through the unforgiving wilderness, with Joe relying on his instincts and will to survive. The episode is action-heavy and stripped down, featuring long stretches without dialogue and no appearances from Ben, Adam, or any other familiar faces. It is just Joe and his would-be killer, alone in the wild. After a harrowing confrontation, Joe ultimately overcomes Tanner in a physical and moral victory. But there is no celebration. He walks away, bloodied and exhausted, but alive. For a show that had long prided itself on family values and emotional warmth, The Hunter felt uncharacteristically bleak and detached. There were no closing scenes at the Ponderosa, no touching goodbyes, or sentimental nods to the past. It was just Joe, alone, walking off-screen and unknowingly taking Bonanza with him. In the end, Bonanza didn't go out with a blaze of glory. It simply faded away, quietly leaving behind the Ponderosa, the Cartwright family, and a legacy of storytelling that still echoes across the dusty plains of television history. Even as the show quietly ended, the world of the Ponderosa had always been more than just guns, horses, and sunsets. Behind the familiar Western tropes, Bonanza had dared to confront the moral and social issues of its time, often in ways that pushed the limits of what television could show. The forbidden scenes from Bonanza. No one was supposed to talk about. Bonanza wasn't just a Western, it was a mirror reflecting the messy, complicated world beyond the Ponderosa. Episodes ranged from high drama to broad comedy, but beneath the colorful horses and sweeping Lake Tahoe shots, the show tackled some of the toughest issues of its time: the environment, substance abuse, domestic violence, anti-war sentiment, and even illegitimate births. And that was just scratching the surface. The series dared to explore prejudice in ways American television rarely did back then. Asians, African Americans, Native Americans, Jews, Mormons, the disabled, and even little people were all subjects of the show's compassion and moral scrutiny. Racism, in particular, was addressed head-on, something that set Bonanza apart from its contemporaries. Take the episode Look to the Stars. It centered on a schoolteacher, Mr. Norton, completely blind to his own prejudice, who routinely expelled minority students. When he tries to kick out Albert Michelson, a brilliant Jewish student whose street experiments caused all kinds of commotion in Virginia City, Ben Cartwright steps in. He confronts Norton, exposing the man's bigotry. Ashamed, the teacher vows to change. The episode even reveals that Michelson would go on to win the Nobel Prize for Physics, a subtle but powerful punch that made the audience sit up and think. Then there's Enter Thomas Bowers. The Cartwrights help Thomas Bowers, an African-American opera singer, when he faces prejudice in Virginia City. At one point, Bowers is arrested as a fugitive slave, and Adam Cartwright openly criticizes the Supreme Court's Dred Scott versus Sanford decision, placing the story firmly in 1857. The episode stirred anxiety among sponsors, General Motors in particular, but producer David Dortort made sure it aired during summer reruns. Even so, a couple of TV stations in the South refused to broadcast it. Hoss got involved too. In The Wish, directed by Michael Landon himself, Hoss protects the family of a former African-American slave when confronted with racism after the Civil War. The series also took on anti-Chinese discrimination in The Fear Merchants, showing the struggles of immigrants trying to assimilate into American society. And in The Lonely Man, the show tackled the controversial topic of an interracial marriage between the Cartwrights' longtime Chinese chef, Hop Sing, and a white woman named Missy. Every one of these moments went against the grain of typical 1960s television. Sponsors worried, stations balked, yet the Cartwrights carried the message with humanity and grace. The Ponderosa wasn't just a family ranch, it was a stage for moral lessons, social commentary, and stories that challenged viewers to see the world differently. These forbidden and often forgotten scenes prove that Bonanza wasn't just entertainment. It was a quiet revolution, weaving social conscience into a Western saga, daring its audience to think, to question, and to empathize long before the word controversial was commonplace in primetime television. Which episode from Bonanza is still your favorite today? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Also, click the next video shown on your screen. You will enjoy it.